You did everything they told you. You followed the path, checked all the boxes, made the sacrifices, worked the long hours, showed up with discipline, humility, and grace, even when no one else did. And now you're here, maybe with a job that pays well, a partner who loves you, a schedule full of things that, on paper, should fulfill you. But there's this silence, a strange, aching kind of silence that whispers when the noise fades, a question that emerges when the achievements are finally yours. Is this it? And worse, why do I still feel so empty? You see, the world celebrates the person who climbs the mountain, but no one talks about what happens when they get to the top and realize they were climbing the wrong one all along. That's what Viktor Frankl understood better than almost anyone. Not just the pain of suffering, but the agony of succeeding without meaning. He survived the unthinkable. Auschwitz, Dachau, Theresienstadt. He watched people lose everything, their families, their freedom, even their names. And yet, some of them survived not just physically, but spiritually. Why? Because they had something the world can't give you, and therefore can't take away. A reason. But here's the paradox that nobody warns you about. You can do everything right in life and still be completely disconnected from meaning. Because meaning doesn't come from what you have, it comes from why you're here. And that's where our story begins. Before we move on to the next part of the video, if this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button right now. That's all you need to do to keep receiving videos like this, deep, honest, and made for people like you. Viktor Frankl saw something in the human soul that most psychologists at the time refused to acknowledge. He didn't just see neuroses as symptoms of repressed desires or past traumas. He saw something deeper, a hollow, a spiritual wound, a kind of psychological black hole, one that pulled everything into it: success, love, sex, approval, even pleasure, and still remained hungry. He called it the existential vacuum. And maybe you felt it, that strange sense of inner deadness in the middle of a perfectly good life. That quiet dissatisfaction you can't explain, because nothing is actually wrong, and yet something is, something vital. Frankl believed that when meaning disappears, we don't become passive, we become desperate. We start chasing all the things that look like meaning, but aren't: achievement, productivity, status, dopamine, validation, control, order. And they work for a while. But eventually, the feeling comes back. The emptiness, the sense that no matter how much you do, build, create, or prove, you are still not in your life. You're performing it, wearing your own story like a costume. That's the existential vacuum. And it doesn't whisper, it waits. It lets you get all the things you thought you wanted, just to watch you realize they can't touch the part of you that's actually starving. And this is where Frankl parts ways from most modern thinking. He doesn't believe your pain comes from your circumstances. He believes it comes from a lack of meaning in those circumstances, and meaning cannot be outsourced. No one can tell you what your life means. You have to wrestle it out of the darkness yourself. But that's terrifying, isn't it? Because it means your life isn't a puzzle to be solved. It's a question only you can answer. There's a moment, maybe you felt it, when the applause fades, when you finally achieve the thing you spent years chasing, and instead of joy, you feel silence, not peace, not fulfillment, just silence. That's the moment most people panic, because no one prepared you for the fact that the things society rewards, status, achievement, even admiration, can leave your inner world untouched. You were taught to climb, not to question, to produce, not to reflect, to perform, not to feel. And so, you succeed on the outside, while quietly decaying on the inside. This is where Viktor Frankl introduces a term that's almost never discussed: noogenic neurosis. It's a condition of the soul, not the mind. A deep, invisible form of suffering that arises not from trauma, but from meaninglessness. You're not sick, you're not broken, you're not weak, you're unanchored. You've drifted so far from the why of your life that you've lost touch with the part of you that even wants to be alive. And this isn't just about depression, it's about disconnection. Disconnection from purpose, from authenticity, from the spiritual axis that holds you upright when the world falls apart. Frankl argued that when people lose meaning, they don't just suffer, they numb. They anesthetize their emptiness with consumption, distraction, control. And ironically, the most ambitious among us often suffer the most, because we believed that if we just did enough, we'd finally feel whole. But wholeness was never the prize. Meaning is, and meaning doesn't wait at the finish line. It lives in the direction you're facing. It lives in the tension between your fear and your soul's quiet voice. And here's where Frankl and Jung converge. Both believed that until you confront that inner silence, that void, you will always remain a stranger to yourself. And you will keep confusing accomplishment with purpose until eventually even your victories feel like loss. Who's mastered the art of appearing fine? You say the right things, you show up, you smile, you function, and everyone thinks you're doing well. But what they don't see is the quiet ache behind your eyes, the exhaustion of carrying a version of yourself that the world rewards, but your soul no longer recognizes. Viktor Frankl had a word for this: the persona, the social mask we wear to adapt, to succeed, to be accepted. And here's the tragic part. The more successful the persona becomes, the more the real self begins to die beneath it. Because the persona isn't you. It's a costume stitched together from other people's expectations. And eventually, you confuse the mask with your face. You become the role you were trained to play. The perfect son, the reliable worker, the confident leader, the high-functioning adult. But deep inside, something is rotting. Because every time you silence your truth to maintain the mask, you betray the very part of you that knows who you are. And betrayal, especially self-betrayal, creates psychic decay. Jung warned us, the stronger the persona, the deeper the shadow. And Frankl, in his own way, said the same thing. The more we ignore our inner longing for meaning, the more we risk becoming spiritually dead while still being physically alive. You can have the image, the money, the marriage, the applause, and still feel like a ghost in your own life. Why? Because you've spent so long being who you were supposed to be. You forgot how to be who you are. This is not failure. This is the beginning. The moment you realize your emptiness is not a sign of weakness, but a signal, a cry from the soul, not to do more, but to return. It always starts quietly, a whisper you dismiss, a sense that something's off, but you keep pushing through. You feel tired, but you say it's just burnout. Disconnected, but you call it stress. A hollow kind of sadness creeps in, but you convince yourself it'll pass. Until one day, it doesn't. One day, the voice gets louder. It starts asking questions you've spent years avoiding. Why are you really doing this? Who are you trying to impress? What part of yourself did you have to kill to become who you are now? And suddenly, the life you built, the one everyone respects, starts to feel like a cage. This is the moment Jung called the encounter with the shadow, the part of you you've denied, suppressed, exiled, but never destroyed. It's the part of you that remembers. It remembers the dreams you buried to be practical, the truths you swallowed to keep the peace, the creativity, the hunger, the aliveness you silenced, just to be accepted. And now it wants out. But here's the danger. Most people, when they hear that voice, run. They drown it in distraction, in work, in noise, in whatever makes them feel in control again. Because the truth that voice carries is brutal. It tells you that the life you've built may be perfectly designed to keep you from ever becoming who you really are. And that's not an easy thing to hear. It means you have to unlearn everything you thought success was. You have to question the map you followed your whole life. You have to step off the path and into the unknown. And Frankl would say, this is exactly where meaning begins. Not in comfort, not in clarity, but in the willingness to face the abyss and keep walking. Because the soul doesn't awaken through achievement. It awakens through confrontation. And once that voice is heard, it cannot be unheard. There comes a moment in every awakening when the questions stop being intellectual and become personal. No more books, no more borrowed quotes, just you and the terrifying awareness that the life you're living was built on someone else's blueprint. And now, you're face to face with a choice you didn't ask for, but can no longer avoid. Will you keep performing a version of life that slowly kills your spirit? Or will you risk everything to feel truly alive? This is where Viktor Frankl's philosophy pierces deeper than most. He didn't believe meaning was something handed down from the heavens or found through endless self-indulgence. He believed it was something we create, something we wrestle into existence by confronting our freedom and our responsibility. Because here's the harsh truth. No one is coming to give your life meaning. not your partner, not your career, not your therapist, your parents, your mentor, or even your pain. Meaning is not waiting out there. It's waiting in you. And it's not passive. It demands authorship. But authorship is terrifying because it means everything is now on you. Your emptiness, your stagnation, your disconnection. It's not the world's fault anymore. It's your move. That's what Frankl meant when he said, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. It's not your pain that's killing you. It's the absence of a deeper why inside it. And the moment you realize that, control dies because you stop trying to make life behave. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions, the right time, the external permission. Instead, you begin to build, not to impress, not to prove, but to reconnect, to reclaim your soul from the performance it's been trapped in, to create not just a life that looks good, but one that feels like it's yours. And that's when everything changes, because the moment you stop performing for the world is the moment you finally start living for your soul. Nobody tells you this part, that once you begin to wake up, you'll go through a kind of death, not physical, but emotional, spiritual. You'll start mourning things that no one else can see, not just the time you lost, not just the masks you wore, but the version of yourself you now realize was never truly alive. This is the grief no one warns you about. The grief of shedding identities that made you lovable, dreams that once gave you hope, relationships that depended on your numbness, and most of all, the grief of realizing how long you abandoned yourself in the name of doing everything right. Frankl understood this kind of grief. He saw that meaning isn't born from victory, it's forged in suffering. And Jung said something similar. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Because when you stop running, when you finally sit with the ache you've been avoiding for years, you don't just feel pain. You feel everything. The rage, the regret, the deep, aching loneliness of having lived a life that was admired, but not inhabited, and the world won't get it. They'll say, but you're doing so well. They'll say, just be grateful. But you know the truth. This isn't depression. This isn't weakness. This is the death of who you thought you had to be. And it hurts. Because you loved that version of yourself, even if it wasn't real. It kept you safe. It got you this far. But now it's time to let it die. Because what wants to be born through you can't breathe in a life built on denial. And this is where most people give up. Not because they're weak, but because no one ever told them that grief is part of awakening, that the path to a meaningful life leads straight through the ruins of the false one. But Frankl did. He wrote, "What is to give light must endure burning." And now you're in the fire, not to be destroyed, but to become real. After the grief, something strange happens. Not relief, not joy, not triumph, but stillness. For the first time in a long time, the noise inside you goes quiet. Not because the pain is gone, but because you're no longer running from it. You've stopped negotiating with your soul, stopped editing your truth to make others comfortable, stopped pretending that being fine is the same as being alive. And in the silence that follows collapse, you start to hear something faint. Something subtle, something that was always there, but buried under achievement, noise, and performance. A pulse, the quiet rhythm of something true, a longing you'd forgotten, a value no one taught you, but that feels ancient in your bones. And for the first time, you don't want to impress anyone with your life. You want to inhabit it, to live from the inside out. This is where Viktor Frankl's brilliance shines brightest, because he believed that even in the darkest circumstances, even in a concentration camp, there remained one freedom no one could take, the freedom to choose how you respond, to choose what your suffering means, to choose whether you become bitter or become awake. That's what meaning is. It's not a belief. It's a decision, a direction, a defiant act of authorship in a world that constantly tries to write your story for you. And when you begin to write again, not from fear, not from ego, but from truth, everything changes. Not all at once, not on the outside, but in here, in the place where you stopped abandoning yourself. You begin to rebuild, but this time, not to be seen. You rebuild to be whole. There's a moment in every healing journey where the question shifts. It's no longer just, how do I stop feeling empty? It becomes, what can I do with this emptiness now that I've faced it? And here, Viktor Frankl turns the entire modern self-help world on its head. Because unlike most voices that tell you to find your passion or manifest your dream life, Frankl believed something deeper. That meaning is not discovered in pleasure. It is not unlocked through comfort. It is found in responsibility, the kind that hurts, the kind that asks something of you. He said, "For the meaning of life differs from man to man, from day to day. What matters is not the meaning of life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at a given moment. And often, that moment comes after collapse, after the loss, after the silence, after the realization that your old identity no longer fits, and your old strategies no longer work. You stand there, stripped down to something raw, unpolished, and real. And life asks you, now that you've seen the truth, what will you do with it? This is the initiation of purpose. When your pain stops being something to escape and starts becoming something you offer. Not in performative service, not in savior complexes or martyrdom, but in quiet contribution. You begin to sense that the very wound that almost broke you now contains something that might heal others. A deeper presence, a hard-won wisdom, a sacred humility that can sit with someone else's suffering without needing to fix it. And that's where meaning begins to bloom. Not as a destination, but as a direction. You stop asking, what can I get from life? And begin asking, what is life asking from me? And the moment that shift happens, you are no longer empty. Because now, you are not waiting to be filled. You are ready to give, So much of your life has been spent looking outward for validation, direction, and meaning. You chased dreams that weren't yours, played roles that kept you accepted, but empty. And through it all, something still felt missing. What if that missing piece is you? Not the version that performs, but the one you buried to survive. Jung called the return to this deeper self-individuation. Not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. Frankl showed us what to do with that self, to turn pain into purpose and choose meaning, even when life hurts. You were told the goal is happiness, but the soul doesn't want happiness. It wants depth, wholeness, truth. And now that you've stopped abandoning yourself, something sacred can finally begin. A life not built on applause, but on alignment. And hey, if you've been stuck in emotional loops, facing inner conflict, or feeling like there's a part of you you've never fully understood, you're not alone. We put together a guide that dives deep into that exact work. It'll help you understand why certain patterns keep repeating, face what you've been avoiding, begin real healing and self-integration, reconnect with your undiluted self if that speaks to something you've been quietly carrying. Check the first pinned comment under this video. It might be exactly what your soul has been needing. No pressure, no rush, just when you're ready. And if this touched something in you, the next video on screen takes this journey even deeper. I'll see you there.